If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths, and sometimes heights, to ensure the power is always flowing. Which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Are you a fan of true crime, cults, conspiracies, and all things sinister? Then tune in with me, your host Steph, every week for a new episode of the Sinister Story Hour. You can find the Sinister Story Hour on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello and welcome back to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. Whether you are interested in construction or not, handy or not, you know that a home is only as good as its foundation. A home on a cracked foundation will not stand for long. Sure, you can live in it. It's useful for the time being. However, you are in danger. In the same way a home needs a strong foundation, so does a relationship. In the same vein, so does a theory or even a law. Most importantly, the foundation of our humanity is given to us during childhood. From the moment we arrive, following that bright light into the world, our synapses are exploding with atmospheric reaction, and, most importantly, the formation of our connection to others. Who we are, whether we like it or not, is a result of our upbringing. If you look at your child and early adulthood and you can see it, you can believe it. If you look back and say, "There's no way I am how I was raised," well, you took a look at what you experienced and it guided you to another way of life. In either case, your past helps to shape your present and your future. It isn't the perfect cookie cutter, but it helps. There are a lot of "it depends" statements. But that's what makes life and humanity so interesting. Each turn you make, each decision or crossroads you find yourself at, leads you down a very unique path. It can be as big as "I do" or "I don't," and as small as taking a left instead of going straight. That is what makes criminal psychology so fascinating. It's hard to pinpoint one thing that made someone flip or go down a darker path, normalizing violence. But that's the catch, right? There isn't just one thing. It's a collection of events, relationships, interactions, and emotions that lead someone down a path. It would behoove us to talk about Aileen's psychological issues and discussions about her diagnoses. Without a general understanding of who she was, it's hard to understand who she became. So let's dig in deep. Let's explore Aileen's psychological issues, evaluations, and other professional studies on her diagnoses. Let's inspect those foundations, because as cracked, chipped, and hardly viable as they are what made the person. Let's start with the attachment theory, which explains an issue that shapes a lot of children at a very young age. This theory explains that as a child, our growth of a healthy personality relies on our trust and confidence in our caregiver. It matters how much of their time they dedicate to us. If they give us physical affection, reassurance that they love us, and give us enough attention. When we are growing up and we believe that our fundamental needs are consistently not being met, we may look at almost everyone as uncaring, fickle, untrustworthy, and this can make us feel as if we are not worthy of being loved. Due to this, as we are developing in our childhood years into our teenage years, we may acquire a manner of avoidant attachment, as Aileen likely did. Avoidant attachment can create decreased activation of dopaminergic brain areas, which includes the ventral tegmental area, substantia nigra, striatum, and medial orbitofrontal cortex. Essentially, what this all means in layman terms is that all of these locations in the brain have non-existent or at least deficiency of motor control, inspiration, enthusiasm, building relationships, and the absence of recognizing habits. People who are avoidant, their orbitofrontal cortex is not stimulated. This area of the brain's inner workings has to do with your moral judgments, how you conduct yourself ethically, and making executive choices. It halts the amygdala, which regulates our emotions. People with avoidant attachment tend to be emotionally overactive. When you are the avoidant attachment type, having an overactive amygdala along with an underactive orbitofrontal cortex, this will make it extremely difficult to stifle your impulses of rage, aggression, and your craving for sex. Aileen also had borderline personality disorder, which can make it almost impossible for people with this disorder to control their emotions. Every emotion can be experienced with intensity, and these episodes of powerful emotions can go on for long periods of time. In order to be diagnosed with BPD, you have to have 5 out of 9 symptoms, and Aileen had 7 out of the 9. Among her symptoms were strong impulses, ongoing suicidal behavior, emotional unpredictability and uncertainty, difficulty getting a handle on her extreme fury, and erratic personal relationships. Borderline personality disorder actually reveals itself in different ways for women and men. For men who have BPD, their aggressive trait and the volume of their right amygdala have a positive connection. For women, the volume of the amygdala in connection to aggression is not there. When women with BPD get aggressive, there is an increase in intensity of connectivity amongst the amygdala and the middle cingulate cortex, which also includes emotions. With men, BPD reveals the complete opposite result. When men with this disorder become aggressive, they have a declining connection between their amygdala and the middle cingulate cortex. For reasons unknown, the link between the amygdala and the middle cingulate cortex gets a lot more intense in women, but a lot weaker in men. Each individual woman has a different brain structure, in spite of having BPD or not, especially when it comes to aggression in general. More aggressive women often have greater asymmetry in the left frontal cortex. malformations in the hippocampus, thalamus, insula, amygdala, and dorsomedial prefrontal cortex. Because of these malfunctions of the brain structure, aggressive women don't partake in trying to understand themselves mentally or others, unlike women who are not aggressive. Women with BPD don't comprehend the repercussions of their actions. They have a hard time regulating their emotions. Therefore, they are more likely to act out of impulse. The MAOA gene, put simply, has the strongest connection to aggression, intellectual disability, psychopathic behavior, and, interesting fact, certain foods can make the symptoms worse. Some people even call this gene the serial killer gene. The MAOA gene is found on the X chromosome. Men only have one X chromosome, which has been proven to make them more likely to be aggressive as well as serial killers. Aileen Wuornos seems to have had a glitch in her brain structure design, not comparable to the prototype of male serial killers that have dominated history. Even though no one knows what Eileen's brain looked like, she probably had an inactive orbital frontal cortex, combined with a hyperactive amygdala, which would have made it challenging, if at all possible, for her to manage her impulses and emotions, which is also plain to see in trial footage when she's on the stand. After we get through the trial, we will go further into what the opinions of the psychologist were when it came to Eileen's sentencing, her mental health, and her chronological age versus her emotional age. Now, let's jump right into today's episode. In the previous episode, we departed from Eileen's story when she told her best friend and lover, Tyra Moore, over a recorded phone call that she would clear Tyra's name and confess that she, Aileen, was the only one responsible for the murders of these men. On January 16, 1991, around 10 in the morning, Aileen kept her word to Tyra and met with Sergeant Bruce Munster and arresting officer Larry Horzeppa in an interrogation room at the Marion County Jail. She sat down and she said, "I'm here to confess to a murder." She told them over and over again these killings were in self-defense. Her stories did, however, change from time to time. In the earliest confession, Aileen told the police that when she and Richard Mallory were at the point where they were about to have sex and he only wanted to unzip his pants, she said she felt like he was going to rob her and rape her. This is when she said she grabbed her purse where her gun was hidden, and the two began to struggle over the purse. When she retrieved the gun, she told the officers she shot him while he was still sitting behind the steering wheel. Then he crawled out of the driver's side door, closing it behind him. When he was able to get to his feet, Aileen stated that she ran to the front of the car, shooting Richard again, causing him to hit the ground. While he was lying there, Aileen shot 2 more times. From there, she told police she went through his pockets and hid his body as explained in the previous episode. After she was done, she hopped into Richard's car and sped away. When she was interviewed again by authorities, there were more details. This time, she said when Richard only wanted to unzip his pants and told her that he didn't have enough money to pay her, She said she grabbed up her clothes, and this is when she explained about the extreme violence she says she experienced by the hands of Richard Mallory, which was explained in part 2. In the next episode, we're going to get into the cross-examination, and Aileen explains her reasons why her story changed, and you'll have to make your own decisions on what to believe. During her confession, she stated, quote, "I shot him because to me it was like a self-defending thing, because I felt if I didn't shoot him and didn't kill him, well, first of all, if they had survived, my ass would be getting in trouble for attempted murder, so I'm up shit's creek on that one anyway. And if I didn't kill him, of course, I had to kill him, or it's like retaliation too. It's like, you bastards, you were going to hurt me." Aileen had been in jail for 2 weeks when she and her attorney decided to sell movie rights to her story. They weren't the only ones out to sell her story. 3 top investigators who were working on Aileen's case retained their own lawyers to field offers from Hollywood bigwigs. When their plans to profit off of Aileen's story hit the public, they had their tails tucked between their legs, embarrassed, yet tried to save themselves by publicly stating that they were inspired to sell their version of the case with only the purest of intentions. The investigators claimed they had intended to put the money into a fund for victims. Authorities began to blame jealous fellow officers for making their plans publicly known because they weren't getting a piece of the monetary pie. Malicious resentment. As a lot of this goes, we may never know if that is indeed how it was released to the public or if their intentions were as pure as they say. In January of 1991, a woman named Aileen Prale came on the scene. She was the wife of a rancher, 44 years old, and a born-again Christian. Aileen felt compelled to write Aileen after seeing her in the paper. Aileen even told her in one of the first letters she wrote that Jesus told her she should write her. The letters led to daily phone calls between the two, and Aileen began scheduling interviews with Aileen. These interviews and their interactions made Aileen Prale popular on talk shows around the nation. Aileen stated that she and Aileen had a soul-binding relationship, like Jonathan and David in the Bible. Quote, "It is as though a part of me is trapped in jail with her. We always know what the other is feeling and thinking. I just wish I was Houdini. I would get her out of there. If there was a way, I would do it, and we could go and be vagabonds forever." This would lead to Aileen being Aileen Wuornos' biggest advocate. But not only that, she took a bigger leap and legally adopted Aileen as her daughter. This episode is sponsored by Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens was created when the founder experienced a ton of gut health issues and ended up on a complicated supplement routine to recover. It cost him $100 a day. He created Athletic Greens after experiencing how difficult it was to create an optimal nutrition routine on your own. Athletic Greens is a climate-neutral certified company. In 2020, Athletic Greens purchased carbon credits that support projects protecting old-growth rainforests. For every purchase of Athletic Greens, they donate to organizations helping to get nutritious foods to kids in need, including No Kid Hungry here in the U.S. Athletic Greens donated over 1.2 million meals to kids in 2020. So, what exactly is Athletic Greens? Well, with one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All the things. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. There's less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting good. You'll get better sleep, better recovery, better mental clarity, and alertness. As far as price, it costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. It's cheaper than getting all the different supplements yourself. You're investing in an all-in-one nutritional insurance. Athletic Greens has over 7,000 five-star reviews. They're recommended by professional athletes and trusted by leading health experts such as Tim Ferriss and Michael Gervais. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free year of supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase at athleticgreens.com/emerging. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/EMERGING to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. January 13th, 1992, the trial for the killing of Richard Mallory began. The prosecutor began with his opening statements.
Carol Aileen Wuornos was charged with murder in the first degree by premeditation, as well as robbery, felony murder, as well as armed robbery. The evidence that we believe will be revealed in the next several days show that on November 30th, 1989, a little over 2 years ago, Richard Mallory, age 51, turned east on I-4 State Highway near Tampa. He didn't know he was living the last days of his life. He didn't know that in less than 10 hours he would be robbed, murdered, and his body would be left by the woods. Of course, he didn't know he was about to pick up a predatory prostitute who had sex with over 250,000 men by her own admissions. He didn't know he was about to admit a thief into his car. Aileen Carol Wuornos, whose appetite for lust and control had taken a lethal turn. She was no longer satisfied with taking men's bodies and their money. Now, she wanted the ultimate control. She now wanted the ultimate goal, and all of what Mr. Mallory had: his car, his property, and his life. The next day, deputy sheriffs found Mr. Mallory's automobile abandoned in the woods, north of Ormond Beach. 2 weeks later, on December 13th, they found Mr. Mallory on the west side of the river, north of Ormond Beach. They found him covered with a carpet. His face and head were decomposed, so identification was not readily apparent at that time. In fact, they found 4 bullet holes in his body. They found his pockets turned inside out. He was fully clothed. His pants were zipped. Miss Wuornos had shot and killed Mr. Mallory, taking his property, went through his pockets, covered him up, and then returned to her motel, where her lesbian lover, best friend, Tyria Moore, was, and she used his car to move their property to another residence. Shortly thereafter, she told Tyria she killed Mr. Mallory, and that was his automobile that they had used to move their property. Ultimately, on January the 16th, 1991, She gave a complete statement after being advised of her constitutional rights, having had a lawyer summoned to protect her rights. She told Deputy Sheriff Larry Hozepa of the VC Sheriff's Office several stories of how and what took place. All her stories agree on a few points. She said she was hitchhiking along the interstate just east of Tampa, heading in an easterly direction when she was picked up by Mr. Mallory on November 30th, 1989. She said they traveled on the interstate towards the Daytona Beach area, and while traveling, they drank and talked. In all of her other stories, she said that she solicited him for an act of prostitution, saying she needed money for her rent. In her story, she said he was wearing blue jeans and a shirt, and without exception, she said they began hugging and kissing after finding a place to park in the woods, and they were having a good time. It was her intent to engage in sex with him for money. In her first story, she says Mr. Mallory paid her in advance, but she became concerned that he might try to take the money back. Therefore, she jumped out of the automobile and pulled from her bag a gun, a pistol, that she'd only had for approximately 2 days. So, then he got out of the automobile to step away, and then she changed her story, saying, no, he didn't get out, and she shot him in the automobile while he was sitting behind the steering wheel. She doesn't remember whether she shot him 2 or 3 times, but in any event, she ultimately killed him. The next story told in the same interview, same officer, was that it was him who solicited money, but this time she said they'd been drinking, talking, and having fun for about 5 hours, parked in the woods north of Ormond Beach. She decided he was a nice guy, and then she ultimately wanted her money in advance. But he was such a nice guy, she didn't think she needed to get the money in advance. Then, they began to move to the ultimate act of having sex. But he wouldn't take his clothes off. He wanted to just unzip his pants. But she didn't like it that way, and they began to argue and struggle a little bit. She got out of the car and said, no, you're not going to just fuck me, you're going to pay me. Then she shot him as he sat behind the wheel. In both stories, when she talks about killing, she says he was sitting in the automobile behind the steering wheel, fully clothed when she shot him, and she was out of the automobile with a 9-shot revolver in her hand, and he was with no weapon. She says after she shot him in the front seat, he crawled out of the driver's door and shut the door, because on the other side of that doorway was a woman who was pumping bullets. She says he crawled out the door, and then she ran around to the front of the car. It's difficult to imagine, but she shot him again. He fell to the ground, and she shot him again. The evidence will give several explanations as to the way she killed Mr. Mallory. She told the deputy she didn't really understand why she shot him. She also said it was because he didn't pay her, and she also said it was because he was going to take the money back. And she also said it was because he wouldn't take his pants off. She didn't want to have sex that way. From her statement, we know he was targeted because he was middle-aged, and according to her, it wouldn't make much difference because he didn't have any parents. The real reason, as we sort out the evidence in its totality, isn't all that complex. She said she didn't know why she killed him, but the evidence shows you why she killed him. She killed him out of greed. She was no longer satisfied with 10, 20, $40. She wanted it all, and she had to take it, and she did. She used a gun to take it, and she shot him to keep it. She also told the deputy that she needed to kill him dead, not just shoot him, because she didn't want to leave a witness. She had a very practical reason for that position. She said, "After all, I'm a professional road highway prostitute, and if I didn't kill him, I couldn't go back on the highway. They would find me." She might have had to find another way to make a living, and she didn't want to be caught. She wanted to be certain that there was no way she could be punished and held responsible for killing this man in this cold-blooded robbery. Intent. She said she intended to let him die. Ultimately, the evidence in its totality will show Aileen Wuornos lacked control. She had been exercising control for years over men. Tremendous power through prostitution. She devised a plan now and carried it out to have the ultimate control. All that Richard Mallory had, she took, including his life. Under the law, she must pay with her life.
Now, here is the defense attorney's opening statements.
Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is going to show when Aileen Wuornos jumped into the car with Richard Mallory on that rainy night in December of 1989, she had no idea that she was going to be traveling with him into a nightmare, and that ride would ultimately bring her into this courtroom today. The evidence will show that on the day that she met Richard Mallory, she had been to Fort Myers. She had received 6 rides on her way back. It was getting late. She was real tired. She stopped near the Interstate I-4 and 75, and it was raining. So she got under the overpass in order to stay out of the weather until it cleared up, and she was standing in the shadows. And as she was standing in the shadows, a car passed by. She saw the lights. It started to pull over and began to back up towards her through the dark. You will hear that she was frightened. Because of the weather and the darkness, she couldn't tell who was in the car. She couldn't tell if it was a car full of guys or what it was. She didn't think she could be seen there. You are going to be hearing evidence that Lee has been on her own since she was a very small child. You will hear that she has been living on the roads. You are going to hear that she is a prostitute living from one highway exit to the next. You're also going to hear that home for her, as the prosecutor has indicated to you, a motel. When times are good, she rents a motel by the week. When they're lean, she rents them by the day. You're also going to hear that times were changing out on the roads. Existence for Lee was beginning to get very dangerous. The frequency of which she met physical abuse was escalating. Remember, she started on the roads when she was a young girl. Things were changing. Time after time after time, she was raped. Time after time, she was beaten up and she wasn't paid. Finally, she armed herself. This night that Richard Mallory stopped on the side of the road and backed towards her, she was making a decision. Do I stay farther in the shadows? Do I hide? Or do I wait to see if it's someone who will give me a ride? Someone I'll feel safe with? Ultimately, he asked her if she wanted to go with him, to go for a ride. And he was going all the way to Daytona, and that's where she was trying to go. She knew that her very best friend, her roommate, the person that she was helping to support, would be waiting for her and wondering why she was out so late. She was happy that she had one ride that would take her to Daytona, because as I said before, it had taken her 6 rides to get from Fort Myers to the side of the road where Richard Mallory had picked her up. So they began to travel towards Daytona. You will hear evidence that Richard was drinking, that he was fixing himself mixed drinks, and that he offered her a drink. You will also hear that Aileen drinks when she's out on the road. She drinks when she's on the road because it gives her courage and it keeps her from being too nervous. So she had some beer before she got into the car with Mr. Mallory. And Mr. Mallory offered her some of his alcohol and his marijuana. He was smoking marijuana, and you will hear that she told him no, that she didn't like marijuana. But it didn't bother her if he smoked because her roommate did it. But she did want a drink. She wanted to rest and have a straight shot home to Daytona. So you will hear that they continued to drink. You will hear that she was getting concerned because he was smoking so much. You will hear that he stopped at one point to get gas, and he asked her if she wanted beer, and she did. And at some point, she indicated to him that she needed to make money for groceries and for rent, and you've heard that Lee is a prostitute, and that is how Lee earns money. Mr. Mallory said he was looking for a good time, so this was perfect. They got into Daytona late that night and went to a secluded area. They stayed in that area until about 5 o'clock that morning, talking and drinking, having fun. You will hear that Lee had decided she could trust him, that she felt comfortable with him. They had not been having sex up to this point. They had been talking. You will hear that Mallory had a lot of things he wanted to talk over. He had some problems in his life. You will hear that approximately 5 in the morning, Mallory asked Lee, "Are you ready to earn your money now?" Lee said yes. You will hear that Mr. Mallory suggested she take off all of her clothes. That way, he would be assured she wasn't going to run away or going to rip him off. Lee, once again, as I told you before, thought that she could trust this person. So she agreed and began to take off her clothes. At that point, Mr. Mallory says he will be right back. I've got to get something out of the trunk. Lee thought that was fine. Mr. Mallory got out of the car. He opened the trunk. Lee folded up her clothes neatly and put them in the back seat. She waited a good while. Soon she heard the trunk close. She was in darkness. Mr. Mallory opened the door, and he also opened a nightmare for Lee. This wasn't the nice, calm person. Again, all night long, he had been smoking and drinking, and Lee had been drinking also. But you will hear evidence of bondage, rape, sodomy, and degradation, and Lee was a victim to that. Ultimately, after a good period of time, Lee was able to get away from him, to pull away from him. During the period of time that she was being subjected to the abuse that Mr. Mallory was inflicting, he told her, "I've done this to other women." He wanted to see her in pain. As I told you before, Lee had begun to carry a weapon. Lee had a weapon in her purse on the floor of the passenger side by the front seat. Lee got that weapon and she shot him, Mr. Mallory. She got out of the car and Mr. Mallory was still coming towards her and she said, "Don't come any closer. Don't come any closer or I'll shoot again." He was cursing at her. He was wounded. He was angry. And he said he was going to kill her and he kept coming. And she shot him again. You'll hear testimony that she was terrified. She didn't know what to do. She decided she needed to get out of there. She wanted to take the car and get away. She drove his car nude, frantically, trying to get away from there, to get away from the situation that she had just been involved in. She drove for a good distance, again, nude, trying to get away, running. Ultimately, she found a place to stop. She got dressed, and she tried to figure out what to do. She knew she couldn't go to the police. She knew she couldn't tell anybody. Who was going to believe her? She's a prostitute. Mr. Mallory was a businessman. She knew they weren't going to believe her. So she went home. She went to her girlfriend's. Actually, both of them were living together and had been for several years at this point, and she told her about it. And you will hear that Tyria Moore was supportive and understanding, telling Aileen she could take care of herself, that she should defend herself, and that she shouldn't be treated like that. However, you're going to hear that Ty has kind of changed her mind about things. You're going to hear she changed her mind when there was a composite on the TV for 2 women. And you're going to hear that Ty agreed to assist law enforcement and come down to Florida and help them catch her friend and her lover. And you will hear that she did that. She came down to Daytona. Law enforcement put her up in a hotel, paid for all of her expenses, and basically gave her whatever she wanted. Beer, food, shopping. And she stayed in that motel and wrote a letter to Lee, told her where she was going to be, and asked that she call her collect at the motel. For a period of 3 or 4 days, she worked on Lee to get Lee to say she had done this, and Ty didn't have anything to do with it, that she didn't know. Finally, after Ty threatened to kill herself, after Ty told her that her family was being threatened, she finally convinced Lee to tell law enforcement what happened. Now you're going to be seeing a video of Lee talking to law enforcement. Contrary to what the prosecutor has told you, you are not going to hear several stories about what happened. You're going to hear her say, "I will protect Ty. I will do anything. I would even die for her." And you will hear her give one version of what occurred. And you will also hear her say, "I was so drunk. I was just so drunk. I was drunk royal. During the time that she was out in the woods with Mr. Mallory, her constant knowledge of impending danger was blurred by alcohol. She was really drunk. She apologizes to law enforcement. "I'm confused. I can't remember everything. I was just so drunk." But you will hear her tell one version of what occurred out there. You'll hear, "He got violent with me." Ladies and gentlemen, Lee Wuornos is not guilty of first-degree premeditated murder or armed robbery. She defended herself. She had had enough. Not one more time could she take it. Not one more time.
11 days later, Aileen took the stand and told her version of events.
Within the last 5 years, we'll go further back later, if you would tell the jury about any instances of rape or harm and where you were living when these occurred.
Okay, I was living with Tyra on Oleander, and it was, you want the year or something?
If you recall the year.
Yes, it was in 86 and in 87 and 88. Also, there was a couple of guys that raped me without any weapon, and I got hurt pretty bad on that.
When you were a young girl just starting out, were you ever physically hurt while you were out on the road? If you can, tell us where you were and how old you were.
Okay, I was hurt a couple of times. There was this guy in Jeffersonville, Indiana. He was a karate and judo instructor and a 7th grade school teacher, and I met him in a lounge. He beat me up so bad you couldn't describe my face, and I got away from him, and when I finally got help and the police arrived, they told me that he raped a police officer's daughter and disfigured her face so bad you couldn't describe it. Then he had killed 2 teenagers, and they were in the backyard of his house, buried in cement. I was lucky. I got away, and I did a report and everything, but I don't know what happened. They beat him up with flashlights and everything and told me not to say anything. It took me about 2 weeks to recover. I had yellow and purple and everything all over my face.
Did you talk about your experiences on the road with Tyria more?
Not really.
Why not?
She didn't want to hear it. She always told me not to talk to her about it, that she didn't care what happened to me out there.
Did you try to talk to her about Richard Mallory?
Yeah, I did, but she didn't want to listen.
Why didn't you quit working the roads when you got hurt?
Because it was my only way that I could. Well, you see, I tried to get churches to help me, but they told me I had to be a part of their congregation or they wouldn't help me. I tried to be a police officer when I was 20, and they told me I had to have $3,000 for tuition, and that then they'd send me to some academy. I didn't have my GED. Then I tried to be a correctional officer here in Daytona, and they told me I had to have a car. And I didn't have a car. I only had a bicycle. I tried the Salvation Army, and they told me I could only crash at their place for 1 night a year. I tried and tried and tried to help myself, and I tried to take the test for the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines, and failed by 3 or 5 points every time. I thought that would help me get off the road if I just kept going into a government military field, but I didn't pass. So the only thing I could do was be a prostitute and live off of, I lived here and there and everywhere, but I had apartments at one time.
Do you remember catching a ride with Richard Mallory?
Yes.
If you remember, when did you meet him?
It was at the end of November.
What year?
1989.
Where were you when you first met Richard Mallory?
I was under an I-4, I-75 overpass.
And describe the first meeting that you had with him.
Well, I was coming from Fort Myers. I had spent a couple of nights there. The second night I left for Fort Myers. I left about 5:30 or 6, and it took me about 6 rides to get to I-4. It was raining, so I walked off. I got underneath the bridge, and it was I was waiting for it to stop raining, and I was pretty much off into where the, I think you call it the eye dock with that slab of cement. So right under there, away from the vehicles, because when they were passing, it was spraying rain all over me. I was over there waiting for it to stop raining, and then it slowed down, and I decided I was going to walk toward the light. There was a big light out there, and I was going to walk under it so people could tell, they could tell if I was a girl or a guy or, what I was. And I started to walk, and the vehicle pulled over before I even got past the bridge. The lights came on and started backing towards me. I didn't know if it was a bunch of guys in the car or what, but anyway, as a vehicle passed and its headlights went on in the vehicle, and I saw one head, so I felt all right. I walked up to the car. I opened the door and I said, Did you stop for me? And he said, yeah, are you going to Orlando? And I said, no, I'm going to Daytona. And he said, oh, you're lucky day, man, because I'm going all the way to Daytona. And I said, wow, this is great. So I got in the car and we proceeded down the road.
Let me ask you something, Lee. At this time, the time that you met Richard Mallory, had you started carrying a gun?
I carried the gun 6 months before. At least for 4 months. I can't really recall when, but it was in Rutland when I got the pistol.
And why were you carrying a gun?
For strictly protection.
If you will, describe your trip with Mr. Mallory, from the time he picked you up until, let's say, Orlando.
So when he picked me up, he asked me, where I was going, and I told him Daytona, and I was real glad and everything, and we started down the road, and he asked me if I wanted to drink, and he had some kind of, I don't know what it was, I just saw tonic bottles, and I thought it said Smirnoff, I'm not sure. He asked me what I wanted to drink, and I asked him what it was, and I think he said vodka, and I said, all right. And I think he had orange juice, and I said, sure, I'll take a drink. So he pulled over and made me a drink, and then we started back on the road, and he asked me if I wanted to smoke some marijuana. I said no. My hands swell, my feet swell, my heart beats a mile a minute. I can't stand it, but if, you smoke, that's your business. And he said, well, you don't mind then? And I said, well, it's your car. I don't care what you do. It's up to you. And he said, okay. So he's smoking marijuana and going down the road. And then he asked me what I did. I told him I'm in the pressure cleaning business. I asked him what he did, and he said he had a video store that he owned and that he was on his way to Daytona. And he was telling me about his video store, telling me he was on the way to Daytona to see some topless bar, and if I knew any girls out there that would be interested in pornography films, and that he'd like to give $2,000 to $3,000 an hour for these sessions. And I told him I don't know anybody. I'm into pressure cleaning. I only got one girlfriend that I know, and I know she wouldn't be interested, so sorry, can't help you there. So we just talked about anything, politics, religion, talked about his store a lot, and still on the sex part now and then, but I just told him I don't know anybody. Constantly on that stuff. So finally arrived in Orlando, and he asked me if I wanted any beer instead of the mixed drink, because I had told him that I don't drink mixed drinks that much, and that I haven't had a mixed drink in about 10 years, it seems.
Had you had any other alcohol that day before you got in the car with him?
Yeah, so I drank beer in Fort Myers. I just came out of the Office pub on my way back to Daytona. I had made around $300, and I only had about $250 or $60 left, and I didn't want to blow it because I had to get back and get that apartment.
What did you do once you got to Orlando?
So when we got to Orlando, he went ahead and he bought a 6-pack for me. I think it was Busch. he asked me if I wanted a pack of cigarettes, and I said, no thank you, I've got some already. And then he got a little more gas and went down the road. We got past Orlando and we had to stop and go to the bathroom. Then I got back in. He was talking about his wife or ex-wife. I don't remember if he was married or not married or nothing, but he was talking about having problems with his old lady, and he was worried about losing his video store, and he was losing his business, and he was going to lose his house, his car. He's going to lose everything.
Did you proposition him?
No.
Why not?
Because I was too exhausted and everything. I had enough money and I just wanted to get home, man. All I wanted to do was get home. That's all I cared about. It was so late. It was about 11:30 when he picked me up at night.
Tell us what happened next.
Okay, so anyway, we stopped, went to the bathroom. He kept asking me, he said, well, how come you understand married people so well? And I said, well, because I always talk to a lot of married people. And he said, but I can't, man. You're just like a psychologist or a counselor. I mean, you're a good listener and you also give good advice. And I said, well, thank you. And then he said, do you mind if we just kind of stop somewhere and talk for a little while? I'd like to listen to your advice and stuff. And now you're helping me and stuff. And I said, well, I really want to get home. You know, I'm really tired and everything. And I've been hitchhiking for so long. And he said, well, I mean, you know, just let's go for an hour or something. I mean, I'll take you home. And I said, well, it is getting pretty late. If I go home now, the dog's gonna... I don't have a key on me. The dog's gonna start barking. The manager lives right next door. I'm gonna have to wake up Ty in the middle of the night. She has to go to work early in the morning. Casa Del Mar, she's still working. So I said, well, I guess I wouldn't mind stopping and talking to you, 'cause I gotta pass a little time. I'm gonna have to wait until the morning. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I might even have to get a motel or something. I don't know what I'm gonna do, because it's too late for me to, you know, I don't want Maggie to wake up the manager, 'cause he's already in a mood to kick us out. So then he said, well, okay, I'll give you a lift home. And I said, well, great. Then that's gonna save me on taxi money too. Oh, he said, all right. And he said, where do you live around? And I told him, well, you got to get off US 1, and then you got to go to Granada. You take Benani over to A18, and then you go north, and I live at the Ocean Shores, I think it was called, motel. So then we continued, and we decided, okay, we'd stop. So you get off the I-4 to 95, we went north, got to US 1, and you parked at a gas station.
Okay, how long had it taken you to get to that point from when he first picked you up? Do you know?
It was about 2.5 hours from Daytona.
Yeah, from when he first picked you up until you got to this place where he stops to get gas at the gas station.
Yeah, about 2.5 hours.
What happened when you stopped there?
Okay, so he said, well, where can we park? And I said, well, anywhere, you know, this is fine. You can park right there if you want to. And he said, no, I'm smoking pot and I don't want to get busted. And plus we got all this booze and stuff. And if a patrol car comes by, and I said, well, if you go north up here, there's a whole lot of places up there. And there's even Quail Run. They've got like a subdivision up there, and it's really quiet if you want to go there. And he said, okay, let's go and check that place out. So we went over there and we're sitting there talking, and we talked for at least, I'd say, an hour and a half, 2 hours, just talking about everything. He asked me about the pornos and all that stuff, and I said, no.
Were you drinking?
Yes, I was drinking beer. He was drinking his mixed drinks, and he was still smoking pot. My God, I couldn't believe how much he was smoking, so much pot. I even asked him what kind it was, and he said Sensimilli, and I've heard Sensimilli's heavy pot, so I couldn't believe it, but he was handling it, and he was doing all right, so we were talking away and everything. So he asked me, you know, how come if you know so many married people and you're so good at counseling and everything, you know, if you know married people so well and you told me you're single and you have a roommate, like, how can you know so many married people? So then I finally told him, I said, I guess I'm just going to have to explain it to you, Richard, because you're being so honest with me, and I'm going to just have to be honest with you. And I said, I'm a hustler. I'm a hooker. I hustle for a living. And he said, how so? You mean sex? And I said, yeah, it was. So then he said, well, God, I thought I was gonna, we were gonna get it on. I mean, eventually get it on together, but, you don't do it for free. You probably do it for money, right? And I said, that's right. I did it for money. And he said, so you don't do it for free, right? And I said, no, I don't. This is my job. It's what I do for a living.
So what did you do next after you had that conversation with him?
Well, then he asked me how much I charge, and I said 30 for head, 35 straight, 40 for half and half, 100 an hour. And I said, well, 100 an hour, and I don't usually, make the person, well, after, like, when the hour's up, I say, you got to give me 100 if the guy's all right, and I'm just staying with him and we become friends, and I say thanks a lot because I only want enough for rent or whatever. I'm not greedy. I don't care about making any more. 100's fine. It's good enough for rent. That's cool. They're now my friends, not like another client. So that's what I told him. And he said, so you mean to tell me if I gave you $100, we could spend a couple of hours together? I said, I guess so, man. I've been with you all this time, and plus I gotta wait for early morning. I've gotta wait for dawn to come because I can't get home. And he said, well, all right. Well, that sounds okay with me. And he said, where's another place to go? Because we can't go here. I mean, it's wide open and everything. And I said, well, if we go back near the gas stations, there's a campground there and some little places that kind of pull off the road if you want to go there. He said, okay, and we start cruising down there, and he fixed another drink and smoked more pot. I mean, he had this pipe that went into the marijuana, and he just twisted it, and I don't know what it was called, but that's what he was doing, and I just couldn't believe how much he smoked. And I grabbed another beer, and I told him, oh my God, I forgot to tell you, I use rubbers. It's mandatory. I said, we might have to stop at the gas station, get some rubbers, because, I don't have any. He said, no, I got some. And I said, oh, okay, that's good. So we started down the road, and we finally got to the area. We couldn't see into the trail, so he asked me to get a flashlight out of the glove box, and I'm looking around, and we finally saw the trail. You went in, and you couldn't go too far in. We were real close to the road, and cars were going by, and you could see a smaller, tinier flashlight out of the glove box, and put it on the dash so they wouldn't see the dome light, because since we were pretty close to the road. And then he said, well, I got an idea. How about if we do this? Now, we both get undressed, so I know you won't skip out on my money. And I said, well, Richard, I've never rolled on a client in my life. I've never skipped out on anybody. But, I can understand, I think, what you're saying, because I told you I use rubbers, and I ain't gonna do it without rubbers with anybody. I don't care. There's no exception to the rule, and I'm precautious. So I guess you're being precautious, too. So, okay, that sounds fine.
Is that unusual for you, to take off all of your clothes first?
No, because I used to do it all the time to let my clients know that, I wasn't going to leave on them or anything, I was being honest with them, like, hey, I'm all right, I'm good, I'm cool.
So what happened after that? Did you take your clothes off after you had that conversation with him?
Well, he told me he had to go back and get some rubbers out of the trunk. And he said, don't worry, I'm going to go get some rubbers out of the trunk. I'm going to get a sleeping bag and a blanket. And eventually the blanket would go on the front seat so, we wouldn't get anything on the car seat. So then he came back. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, I was undressing, and then I took my bag and I put it over near the hump here and started taking my jeans off and stuff. And And by the time I was starting to take off my jeans and everything, he came back and I was half undressed, putting my stuff in the back seat. And I helped him rearrange the sleeping bag and everything on the seat, and I went and took a leak and everything. I said to him, well, this ain't fair. I said, we agreed on both of us getting nude, and I'm the only one nude. And he turned down the dome light and said, not bad. And I said, well, I don't know, because I've got a lot of stretch marks and the beer belly and everything, and now, I just think otherwise sometimes. And he had this kind of smirk on his face, and he says, you'll do, and turns off the dome light.
Was he mad? Was he mad at you for asking him to take his clothes off?
Yeah, I didn't ask him to take... Well, yeah, I'm starting to, like, at this point, but I haven't even asked him yet, and that's the next thing I asked. I said, well, Richard, why don't you take your clothes off and let's get started, 'cause it's cold in here. 'Cause it was really cold outside, and he rolled down his window and he said, yeah, it's cold. I love cold weather. And all this wind, 'cause it was so windy out and the wind's blowing inside. And I said, hey, Richard, why don't you just close the window, man? It's cold. And he's ignoring me, and he started to act like he was unbuckling his pants and then unzipping his pants. And he said, what if I told you I don't have enough money? And I'm telling you, I really don't care. I was just doing this for a little, was really just doing this to pass the time, but I wasn't going to do it for free. I got to, definitely, I have to make something out of it, because I've got somebody at home I can get my sex from if I need it. And I mean, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, I said, how much you got? And he said, I've only got a little for breakfast and some for gas. And I said, Richard, I said, no way. I said, I'm not here for my health. We made an agreement, and I'm sorry, but I guess we're going to have to just call this off, because he's acting like he doesn't have any money. So I turned around, and I had my clothes on top of some boxes or something that were in the back, and I can't remember exactly, but I started to grab them, and when I was grabbing my clothes, I saw him coming towards me, and I was going to turn to look at him, and before I even got a chance to turn and look, he whipped a cord around my neck and pulled me toward him.
And you told him at that point, I'm not going to have sex with you. Had you told him no?
Yeah, no way. I said, I'm not here for my health. No way, no. We're going to have to call this off then.
Then tell us what happened and how you felt.
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now. I'm really nervous, and I'm really getting pretty shy and embarrassed, and this is hard for me, so just bear with me. He put the cord around my neck, and he said, yes, you are, bitch. You're gonna do everything I tell you to do, and if you don't, I'll kill you right now, and I'll fuck you after, just like the other sluts I've done. And then he said, it doesn't matter to me. Your body will still be warm for my huge cock. And he was choking me, and he said, do you want to die, slut? And I just nodded no, and then he said, you're going to listen to everything I've got to say and have you do? And I nodded yes, and he told me to lay down on the car seat and told me to lay down, and he told me to give him my hands, so I had to lift my hands up like this, and he tied my hands and tied me to the steering wheel.
Where is he in relation to you at this point?
He's sitting in the driver's seat.
Is he behind you?
I'm laid down like this with my feet near the window.
Okay. And then what happened?
Well, then he got out of the car and told me to slide up and get comfortable, because he said he was going to see how much meat he could pound in my ass. So he walked around from the driver's seat to the passenger side and opened the door, and he started to undress, throwing his clothes on the floor, and this is very embarrassing for me. So he got in, and then he lifted my legs all the way up where my feet were near the window, and then he began to start having anal sex, and he's doing this in a very violent movement. And then I don't know if he came or what, climax. I don't know if he did that. And then he violently took himself out and violently pushed himself in my vagina.
Were you saying anything to him at that point?
No, I was crying my brains out.
Was he saying anything to you?
Yes, he was saying that he loved to hear me, the pain when I moaned. And he loved to hear my crying, and it turned him on.
Okay. Then what happened?
Well, he pretty much bruised my cervix and everything else and got off, and he had bruised my ribs and everything else, and he got up, took his clothes, walked over to the driver's side, and then put his clothes on the hood of the car. He had the door open, and now he went and got the ignition out of the car and went into the trunk and got something out of there and brought it back, and it was a red cooler and a blue tote bag. So anyway, in this red cooler, there were 2-liter bottles. I think they were Pepsi, I don't know, but there were 2 big bottles. I think the tote bag had a maroon large towel or something like that, a white or yellow towel. I was turning my head to see what he was doing, and I was still tied to the steering wheel and straining my neck, and sometimes I had to put my head back down because I couldn't turn all the way to see what he was doing. And at one time I asked him, what are you doing? And he said, "Oh, I'm full of surprises, honey, for you tonight." And I turned my head to keep watching, and the dome light was on, so this is how I saw what was coming out of the bag. And then there was a bar of soap, toothbrush, rubbing alcohol, and a bottle of Visine. So then he took the bottle of alcohol and the bottle of Visine and put it in front of my face, and he said, "This is what this is." And I'm like, "What?" And he takes the Visine and he puts it on the front of the dash, and he takes the rubbing alcohol and puts it with this other stuff, and this guy begins to take a bath because he had blood all over his penis with some other jazz, which I don't think I should say.
Okay, by taking a bath, do you mean he was cleaning himself?
He began to take a bath using this water in the bottle, and he put rubbing alcohol, I guess. I don't know if it was rubbing alcohol or what, but later he just poured it all over himself, and he was saying that the last sluts he had were full of disease, and he always had to clean himself.
What happened next?
Okay, so he's cleaning himself, just blowing me away, and I said to myself, I think this guy's gonna kill me. He's gonna get rid of me, or I don't know what he's gonna do, dissect me or something. I don't know what he's got in that bag. Like, he's strange, he's totally weird. So, he gets done cleaning, and he gets his clothes back on, and he gets the cooler and brings it back to the trunk. He puts everything in the tote bag, leaves it there. He goes around the passenger seat. He grabs the bottle of Visine from the dashboard, and he goes around the passenger side, and he says, This is one of my surprises. Oh, Lord, my ears are ringing, and I'm dizzy a little."
Put your head down for a second. We can wait.
Okay, all right. So he takes the Visine and he lifts up my legs, and he put what turns out to be rubbing alcohol in the Visine bottle, and he sticks some up my rectum area, and it really hurt really bad because he tore me up for a while, and also in my vagina, which was really hurting really bad. And then he walked around back to the driver's side and holds my nose open like this, and he squirted rubbing alcohol down my nose, and he said, "I'm saving your eyes for the grand finale." And he put the Visine back on the dash. Then I was really pissed. I didn't care. I was yelling at him and everything, and he was laughing, saying, "That's what I want to hear. And when you start crying and all that pain, There were a few more items he put in the tote bag, and then he put the tote bag back in the trunk, and he closed it and come back. He had this gray radio, square gray radio, 2 speakers on it. Got the radio and went around the passenger seat and made a drink because he couldn't get through with me tied to the steering wheel. And then he walked back to the driver's side and went underneath the seat and got his marijuana, got his cigarettes off the dash, and then I guess he walked over to the front of the car because I couldn't see where he was and I felt the car move. He's just sitting there and he cranks up the radio. Windows still open in the car. I'm freezing to death and he's just sitting out there listening to the radio, and I'm thinking, this guy's thinking about how he's gonna kill me. So I'm desperately trying to get untied from the steering wheel. I tried 101 times, and finally he even said, I feel you moving in there. Don't worry, you ain't gonna get untied unless I untie you. And, I didn't care. I kept trying. I kept moving my body up like this and pulling. And he finally came back after about an hour. And it must have been an hour or so. It seemed like the longest time. And he said, finally, the cold weather got to me. Can you believe it? I'm getting in. And I'm thinking, how is he going to get in? I'm here tied to the steering wheel. How can he get in? And he said, I'm going to untie you from the steering wheel, and you better be a good girl or I'll kill you. So he untied me from the steering wheel, and he put the rope around my neck and held it like a leash around my neck and told me to move over so he could move in. So I moved over, and he moved in and closed the door. And he's still saying all kind of jazz about what he wants to do. And then he told me to turn toward him and lay down and spread my legs. He has all of his clothes on. I guess he's just gonna unzip himself. I don't know.
Were you saying anything to him, Lee?
I didn't say nothing. I was scared.
Okay. So then what happened?
I may have said something sardonic to him like, why you still got your clothes on? Why don't you take off your clothes like you did before? I don't recall. I may have. I don't know. Maybe it's just too long ago. It was hard enough for me to remember these blackouts because it was a blackout situation I had to remember. I can't remember every word and every incident. That's just hard for me to remember. I'm trying hard. I'm trying my best to remember everything he did to me and did say.
Okay. Just tell us what you do remember.
Okay, so he had me turned and he wanted to start having sex with me, and he had the rope. Later I learned it was jacks to a stereo, but it was cut. It was like a jack to a stereo or TV or something, and it was brown, gray. So he was holding me like this, like reins. And that's when I said, I'm gonna grab this. So I grabbed it and it came right out of his hand, and I flung it in the back seat.
Did you say to him you were going to grab this or?
No, grab it, grab that, do something. You gotta fight. I thought to myself, I gotta fight. I'm gonna die. This guy is gonna play with me, and then he's gonna kill me. He's already said he's gonna kill me. He's already said he's killed other girls. I gotta fight. I just gotta fight for my life. Plus, now I was close to the area where my bag was and where my gun was.
Where was your bag?
My bag was near that hump because, I had first had it on the right side, but I had to move it because it was in the way for me to get my jeans off. Actually, it was almost on the hump. I had pushed it all the way over so I could get room to move and change.
Okay, so what happened next?
So then I grabbed it, I flung it. He takes his left arm, he's choking me, and I grabbed my hand up just like this to keep it away, and he slapped me really hard in the face, and he started choking me, so I grabbed his right arm, and I kept it up, and I get upward with my feet and pushed him back, and he kind of quit struggling and just got up on his knees and said, "Oh, you're going to be a lot of fun." While he was saying that, I jumped up real fast and I spit in his face, and he said, "Oh, you're dead, bitch, you're dead." And he was wiping his eyes, and I laid down real quick and grabbed my bag, and he was starting to come for me. And when I grabbed my bag, I whipped my pistol towards him. And he was coming toward me with his right arm, I believe, and I just shot immediately. I think I shot twice as fast as I could.
Then what did you do?
Well, he started coming at me again, and another shot, and he stopped. And I kind of pushed him away from me, and he kind of sat up on the driver's seat. And, I hurried, opened the passenger door, ran around the driver's side, opened the door real fast, looked at him, and he started to come out. And I said, "Don't you come out. Don't you come near me. I'll have to shoot you again." Or, something like, "Don't make me have to shoot you again," or something like that. And he started to come at me, and I shot. I mean, I don't know where I shot him at. I just shot him, and he fell to the ground. And I pulled away, I pulled him away from the car. You want to hear the rest?
What happened after you shot him the last time?
All right, so I stood there and I looked down at him and thought, what am I going to do with the car? I said, well, I got to get him away from the car because he's near the car. I'm going to run him over if I don't move him. So I dragged him away. I got back in the car, totally nude, and went to reach for the keys and the ignition to start up, and it wasn't there. So I ran back to him. I looked in his pockets for his keys. I got the keys, went back to the car, started it, backed up, turned the lights on, and looked at, looking at his body. I went back to him and I checked his pulse, and he was dead. And I saw carpet in front of him because of the headlights, and I said, I don't want the birds to be picking at his body. So I grabbed the carpet and I put it over him, jumped in the car, backed out, took off nude, and I went back to Quail Run.
Lee, did you take anything else off of him when you went into his pockets other than the car keys?
No.
So you went back to Quail Run?
Yes.
Why did you go back over to Quail Run?
Because I was totally nude. And I had to get dressed, and I had to get my senses together. I was, totally crying, shaking, totally just scared out of my mind. I had to change. I had to put on my clothes. When I got there, I realized that I had a little bit of blood on me and stuff, and so I went into the trunk and I got out the stuff that he got, and, I started cleaning myself like he did. And then I put my clothes back on, and I took all the stuff that was in the car and I threw it down on the floorboard, and I took all my stuff and put it on the seat. And I just sat there wondering what to do. I was drinking a beer and thinking, what am I going to do? I just didn't know what I was going to do. I said, I'm going to have to lay low, and then what am I going to do, man? I can't get out. I'm going to have to drop this car off, whatever. When I saw the radar detector, I said, I'll keep it to pawn it off for food or whatever. I'm not going to be able to get out on the road. So now I'm scared that they're going to find his body. I've got to go and hurry up and dump this car.
What time is it? What time is it by this time?
This is, I remember when I was throwing stuff out. I was throwing a bunch of stuff out into the woods and just kept on throwing. And now I go, and when I drove to another area, I stopped again and threw a bunch of other stuff out in the woods. And I noticed his watch, and I checked, and it was 6:30 in the morning.
When do you last remember in terms of time that he was alive?
I don't know how long. See, I didn't know what time it was. All I knew is he was out there sitting in the car on the hood for about an hour. I never got to know what time it was.
All right, so what did you do after that, after you noticed what time it was?
I said, I gotta hurry up. I gotta get back to Ty. I'm tired and beat up. I'm hurting all over. My crotch hurts. My vagina hurts. My nose hurts. I'm freaking out. I've got to take a shower. I mean, these are the things going through my mind, as I'm sitting here. I got to hurry up and get rid of this car, go back home, take a shower, hurry up, get this car. I was just going to take it to the car wash it, and go drop it off somewhere to get rid of all my prints. And, I'm so scared now because I just had to kill this guy, and I don't know what to do.
What did you do?
Well, I went back home, and when I got home, my plan was to go to the car wash the car off and everything, and get rid of it. But when I got there, my dog Maggie and my cat Tyler, well, Maggie tore the chair all to shreds, and she chews carpets too, and she chewed the carpet all to shreds and tore the curtains and blinds. So when I knocked on the door and Ty opened the door for me, and I saw all this, I said, "What is this?" And she said, "I don't know, Maggie and Tyler just got crazy while I was at work." And I said, "Oh my God." And I just realized that I've got this guy's car, and, we're supposed to move that day. And it was a total coincidence that we were moving that day. We had 3 people that were going to be moving us at around 5 o'clock after Ty got off. And I said, "Man, if the manager sees this, he's going to call the cops. He's going to have the cops here." So I've got the car there. I've got to get rid of the car and everything, and all the boxes and everything were ready to move. So I said, let's just move now. A guy loaned me a car. He's waiting in a motel. He's going to let us keep it just a couple of hours to move. And I tell her, call Jane. Tell her we're coming over, just to hurry up and get out of that room, because it was totally destroyed. And then Ty said, "What are those? Hickeys on your neck?" I said, "What are you talking about?" So I walked in the bathroom and looked and said, "Oh, I just slapped a mosquito real hard or something." I was trying to ignore it, and she kept asking, and she told me, "I told you never go out there with hickeys. Don't ever get hickeys while you're out on the road." And I said, "Don't worry, they're not hickeys, I don't know what it is." And then that was the end of that.
What did you finally do with Richard Mallory's car?
We got to the new apartment, I hurried up, we put our stuff in, and Ty had to hurry up and go back to work. And I had to go right back to my motel, and she had to pick up the moped, my 12-speed. My 12-speed was there too. So they were there together, and I decided to put the 12-speed in the back of the trunk, and she took the moped, and I went to the car wash, hurried up, washed the car, cleaned it out. Then I went down to John Anderson and went up to a place to park it, and I took the bicycle out. I was cleaning the car to get rid of prints, and I forgot about the glove box. I forgot that's where I found his wallet underneath the seat. I did go through it. I was finding out who he was, if he really was Richard or what his name was, and there was a couple of credit cards and everything, and I threw it in the glove box. And as I was wiping down and remembered the glove box, I said, "Oh God, I forgot to throw this out." So I took them out. I went to the back of the car and I dug a hole there, and then I found this darn vodka bottle underneath the seat. And a couple more glasses were underneath the seat that I didn't notice. So I took them out, I put them in the hole, and I started checking underneath the seat really good. I was finding pens and business cards and stuff, and then I was just throwing it. I didn't really know what I was doing. When I got done burying the wallet and the glass and vodka bottle and stuff, whatever I was finding in the car, I was just throwing it. I didn't know what I was doing there.
Did you take anything out of Richard Mallory's wallet when going through it?
Well, he only had about 38 or 42, 48, something like that. It wasn't very much money.
Did you take it?
Yes.
Did you take any credit cards?
No.
What did you do when you finished throwing things in the woods?
Well, I got on my bicycle and I started riding and just threw the keys into somebody's yard or something. It was like a bush or something. I just threw them. And I went back home, and that's it. I just went home.
Lee, did you make it clear to men that picked you up that you would not have sex with them without money?
Well, I had 2 guys have sex with me without money once, and I didn't do anything to them, and I had my gun with me. They just never used a weapon on me. They never hurt me. They weren't really physical or anything on me. They just, they just didn't want me to go unless they had sex. But Basically, I told him I don't do it without money.
Lee, have you ever been convicted of a felony?
Yes, ma'am.
How many times?
1 time.
Have you ever had anal sex prior to this time with Richard Mallory?
Never in my life. Never. I always told my clients I don't do anything kinky, anything dirty and nasty, always decent, always clean.
When Mallory started getting violent with you, did you try to calm him down? Did you try talking to him?
I didn't. I couldn't. He was choking me so hard that the blood was running to my head and spots were before my eyes and I couldn't talk. All I could do was help try to get the cord not to be so...
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Next week, we'll start to get into the cross-examination of Aileen Wuornos, then the closing arguments, sentencing, and so much more. Stay tuned, you do not want to miss the cross-examination. Thank you so much for listening to Part 3, and until next time, please stay safe and take care.